YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Drexwell Seymour. Today this segment is more or less on teenage pregnancy and single parenting. And I have as my guest today, Alicia Swann. We're both from the same island,
Yes.
South Caicos. Alicia, welcome to my YouTube channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Alicia, you are a mother of 6 children.
Correct, yes.
And you became a mother at a very young age. I think you were 16, right?
16, correct.
Tell us about that. I mean, how did your mother, how did she feel when she got the news that you were pregnant, and how did you go about doing that?
A very good question, Mr. Seymour. Thank you again for having me. Well, growing up in South Caicos, and you knowing my family personally, I grew up in a very strong Christian family all through my entire life. And I had a boyfriend, obviously, and I was under the impression, I listened to him, a boy only gets a girl pregnant if he wants to. So it was my first experience actually being with someone. And when I got pregnant, of course, I was extremely shocked. I didn't know how to tell my mother because she too is a strong single mother. However, when she found out that I was pregnant, she basically found out on her own. And I was surprised how supportive she was, because all of my life, growing up, I never even said a curse word until I was about almost 17 years old. It's just out of the norm for me. Everything was just new. This whole experience was new. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, please don't let it be a boy, because I'm an only child. I've never been around boys intimately to that level. And God has a very strong sense of humor. My first child was a boy. My mother had been supportive straight through the entire experience. My son basically became hers, and anyone who knows my family would know that. She was there every step of the way with me, bringing them up. And I think it had a lot to do with her making sure that that I continue receiving the nurturing that I needed, being that I was still at a tender age, and ensuring that my child, and which eventually became my children, also received strong Christian and family values, something that I can never repay her for. So yes, she was extremely supportive, and I am blessed to say that because I know it's not always the same for a lot of single mothers, which was in my situation.
Right. Now, Lisa, you said that you were shocked. So you had unprotected sex, but you were shocked. Explain that. Don't you know that if you have unprotected sex, that you are more than likely to get pregnant, or you just didn't think you were going to get pregnant?
That's the thing. There's a myth. There's always myths out there. And like I said, I grew up in a very sheltered environment. So my then boyfriend, who is actually the father of my children, all of my children, he was someone that was allowed to be around my family a lot more, myself and my mother. So there was a level of trust factor there, where I felt like, okay, if he says I won't get pregnant, even though I should know better, I wouldn't get pregnant because I trust him to that level. So that is why I was shocked. It may be juvenile and I was still a child. So that too, sometimes you find people get very hard on young teenage mothers. But we have to remember they're still developing. A human being doesn't fully develop as per science until you're 25. So that is a long way to go before you fully develop into mature adult. And sometimes we'd be very hard, especially on the females, when this happens or this experience happens to them. I just no different than anyone else who fall into it. I never thought it would have happened to me. I said, okay, maybe girls who have various partners or have sex, so many times and all these things, you tend to put so many things in categories that is just myths. It can happen to anyone.
Absolutely. So Lisa, you were 16 years old with your first child. Were you kicked out from school? Or was it your last year in high school?
Fortunately, it was my last year of high school, so I was able to complete basically all of my secondary education to the very last 3 months, yes.
And so you had a second child. I mean, how far apart was the second child from the first child?
Well, after my first son who, was born, I went, a few months after he was born, I was went to Grand Turk for the community college. And that was a year and a half later, I found out that I was pregnant with Deontay, my second son, while I was in school again. So yes, it's a year and a half apart that they were,
Right.
between the two of them.
Okay, so people watching the show, right, would say, you didn't realize the first time you would get pregnant.
Yes.
You're gullible. All of us. Because I used to think only married people could have,
Yeah.
only married women could have children.
Yes.
And, but for the second time though, people are there watching, and what advice would you give them? I mean, why get pregnant a second time? Is it now that you know from the first time, why the second time?
This is an excellent question, and I'm so happy that you brought this question up, because I've had over the years where people would say, well, you got pregnant and then you got pregnant again and now you had 6, how did you allow that to happen? Life happens. I'm not making any excuse for having my children.
No.
They are a blessing, so to say. I mean, in every aspect of my life, they've been basically there up to before my first 16 years of life. My entire life, I had my children. And even up to today, I barely go anywhere unless you see me with one of my children. I wouldn't address the fact of saying, why, or how would you say you had another and another. I would rather focus more on what you do in a situation that you find yourself in. Reason being is that in life we all have choices. And the choice of even being pregnant with the first child, even though I was young and then, youthful and ignorant to so many different things, not being on birth control or not even having option of being on birth control, it happened. But what we need to focus more, especially as young mothers, and this is my message to you, young teenage mothers, young mothers on a whole, at the end of the day, having a child is a blessing. We are not given the opportunity to have children to make decisions fully for their entire life. We're stewards of these souls, such as ourselves, for a certain period of time. And after that certain period of time, they have to be released, whether we want to or not. Sometimes it's harder for a single mother, especially when you had your child at a very tender age and you watch them grow throughout the years, to say, let them loose, because you've always been that protective person. I would say this, as a single mother, there's no manual. Actually, there's no life manual. There's no right or wrong way to say, okay, if you have a vehicle, you read the manual and this is what you do. If the battery isn't working or what have you, that helps you. The only manual we have in any situation in our life, including single parenting, is our Bible. We have to base our decisions and the decisions that we make for those that we have in our care based on God's word. And with that comes with a lot of prayer and a lot of faith. We don't know what we're going to get at any point in time of parenting. When I look back at my life as a single mother, I have to say that most of what I've done is because of how I was raised. I was thinking of this when I was coming to the show yesterday, planning in my mind about this, because I'm like, okay, what am I going to say? There's so many aspects of this that can be told about being a teenage mother and being a single mother. But I had this reflection that came to my mind. I remember when I was a very young girl, I was about 3 or 4 years old, and my mother owned a restaurant in South Caicos. And many people don't know, many of her customers, if she worked in her restaurant until 3 o'clock in the morning, I actually was behind the counter. She would be in front talking to the customers, but there was a little counter underneath that she laid my blanket and my pillow, and I would sleep there until she finished work. And I recall sometimes I would wake up a little bit when she's putting my blanket over my head at the wee hours in the morning and walking with me after a long hours of on her feet and serving food and making sure that she can provide for me. Her restaurant at the time was located close to the Cox residence, Lewis Cox. So you had Kim Cox and Pop Cox and all of them, and Edith Cox. And they were also very instrumental in assisting my mom with me. I do recall many times throughout the night, Pop or Edith or Kim would come to the restaurant and say, Marna, please. It was almost like they were begging her, please, it's late, allow her to sleep over for the night because, it's so late and so forth, and you can always pick her up in the morning. And it was almost even that stage was a debate for her where she didn't even want to let me go for a few hours in someone else's care. Well, that same nurturing is what I have done with my children. My children have always been first priority in my life, and anyone who knows me knows that. As mothers, we have to prioritize what is most important and why God placed children in our lives. There's only a season for everything, and your season of motherhood, for me, is to make it count. I may not always be able to sit my children down because I have to provide for them and I have to, work and I have to take care of them and so forth. But what I've done on many occasions is when I am doing certain things, I take them along. So the examples that they see goes way beyond what I can tell them, but actually the life that they've seen their mother lived. Whether they always go that path, it's all up to them. But I have to be certain within myself that I've done everything that I can to be the best version of a mother for them. Whether it's a single mother, whether it's with a father, it doesn't really matter. God knows before we even know why. So the question for single mothers, don't question why you're a single mother. Question, what am I supposed to do being a single mother? And the decision is not always easy. For some, that may mean I am not in a position, whether physically, mentally, financially, whatever, to really nurture or take care of my child the way I should. So your decision may be one, should I have this child raised by my mother who's more solid in terms of raising a child, or having a baby and providing it to a mother who can't birth a child of their own, but have all that they need to be a mother, other than the biological fact that they can't bear a child of their own. So when you look at motherhood, it's just so many variations of it. I chose to take the mantle and be that mother from a very young age, and I took it extremely serious. It's something that I've lived to make sure that my children can see me living an example.
And you also chose to bring your children to the world.
And I've also chose to bring every one of them in the world.
Some children are aborting the children, but you brought your children into the world.
Yes. Yes. And it's never an easy choice to make. I have an aunt, and I tell this story openly because she's like a second mother to me, my Aunt Madeline Mills.
Oh, yes.
And I used to go to her a lot for advice on certain things that I wasn't always comfortable speaking to my mom about, because I know at the end of the day she also has my best interests at heart. And after my first son, that comes back to the question you asked, she was like, you should be on birth control, her being a nurse and in the healthcare field and so forth. And she's like, I would give you birth control, but I know if your mom find out that it was me, all heads will turn because it was not her decision. So no, I did not go on birth control right away. I was still very young when I had Deontay. I was less than 18 when he was born. So I was still underage, and I was not on birth control, and I ended up getting pregnant again. But I recall my aunt at one point, she had said, Lisa, you're such a smart student, you're a smart girl, you're doing well. You just ruined your life by having a baby. And you get that sometimes. People tend to think that because they see you as the individual, but they don't see the connection that God is making with you, with your offsprings at the moment. And I've always been one to not focus on the negatives. I tend to live life on a positive note. I don't like to look at negatives. It doesn't make you feel good. It doesn't enhance your life anyway. So to me, I don't see any benefit of it. So I stay far away from it. And a few years after my probably a year or two after my second son, I moved to Provo for a better life. I had a good job in South Acres. I've always been blessed with very good jobs. I was running the only hotel in South Acres at the age of 17. And I was doing a very good job, but I wanted more. I wanted more for myself, and I wanted more for my children. And I moved to Provo, and my career kept on excelling. As my aunt, at one point, she came back and she said, "Lisa, I must apologize to you. You basically actually made a good balance, having your children, keeping your head together, and still doing well for yourself." So that also, never allow, even with those that love you, their love for you may see you in a different light than what actually your life intimately is. Only you and God walks that journey. And you have to know who you are, because your light and who you are is what makes way for you. So my encouragement will be, always know who you are. Having your children are a blessing. What you do with that blessing is up to you. Whether you're in a position of being the mother that you would want to be, if you feel like you're not capable of being that, there's nothing wrong with seeking help. But do not keep yourself in a position where you feel like you're stagnant in your own personal development, just to say, I'm raising my children, and place your children in a worse situation because you feel that's the only way out. Reach out for help. Reach out, even if you don't see a way. Find persons like myself who are passionate about young teenage mothers, about single mothers on a whole. And I know there's many others like myself. Reach out to someone you're comfortable with and ask advice. There's nothing more selfish that you can do than not to seek advice for the betterment of yourself and your children. You'll be maybe surprised how much help you will receive.
Well, Lisa, thank you very much. I was going to ask you to share advice, but I think you just did that. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the YouTube channel.
Thank you.
And I just want to say to all of you listening to this YouTube channel that, we do this show to inspire people. I know there are a lot of young people out there who gotten pregnant or who are pregnant, who are involved in relationships. And sometimes society, we look down on people who get pregnant. But those things do happen. While I wouldn't encourage people people to get pregnant until, they're an adult and they're sure what they want in life. But teenage pregnancy exists, and it's happening every day. And once you become pregnant, you just need to, rise up and do the best you can. Don't let the pregnancy, stop you. That child that you are with is a blessing. It's a gift from God. And, don't let people think less of you. But at the same time, don't go out there trying to get pregnant, to say you have a child and you're in a difficult position to take care of that child. So you have to, make sure you're in a position to take care of your child. Make sure you're an adult. And I hope the story of Lisa has inspired you. Lisa's doing really well.
Thank you.
She has 6 children. She's a grandmother. She has her own business, and she's doing well. Not because she has children from very young means that's the end of her life. It's not the end of her life. In fact, I believe having those children, push Lisa to make herself better, to prove to people that she will make something of herself, and she has. So Lisa, thank you very much again.
Thank you. Just before closing, I would like to speak on something you just mentioned about not trying to get pregnant. I've seen that there seems to be a trend with young girls recently that because a friend is pregnant, they also want a baby as well. Please do not do that. If it's something that doesn't happen, don't plan to be a teenage mother. It's nothing that you should plan for. Plan for your education. Plan for a solid life for yourself. And the advice that I give my children, I give to every young person there. Make sure you have your own house, your own car, if it's your business or career, whatever it is. always try to have a solid life for yourself if you can before becoming a parent. Let, if you become a parent, be something that you deal with if it happens, but do not plan to be pregnant because a friend got pregnant.